Moth Journal, Paul McMichael, Buchanan, Michigan, January 1989. All that is left to do is frame the last few specimens, finish the display panels, gather up some notes for my presentation, and write my final paper. I am overwhelmed but confident. I also feel an anxiousness, a coming emptiness. I can't help wondering what will take the place of this amazing project, what will fill my days when I am truly finished. I have learned that moths are nature's masters of disguise. Some take on the appearance of leaves, shed skin, assorted garbage, all to hide from their enemies. Several of the families of Noctuidae have wing colors and patterns that actually look like bird droppings. This is how they hide and survive. Some moths look so much like other insects. The hornet moth looks like a yellowhead. The entire family of Cecidae resemble a sorted wasp, and the plum moth is easily mistaken for a crane fly. In fact, the appearance of many moths suggests the features of animals and birds, and the moths are named accordingly. The monkey moth, the peacock moth, the hummingbird clearwing, the mighty hawk moths, including the elephant hawk moth of Asia, its body tapering to a kind of trunk. Amazing. The huge owl moths of India and Japan have wings that are so much like the face of an owl that even the human eye is tricked. Was there ever a creature put on God's earth more suited to looking like something besides what it actually is? Moths are tricksters. Another reason to be amazed by them. I finished my displays in a constant state of awe. Chapter 14. Trickster. You called out for Abe in your sleep several times during the night, Graham said. You haven't done that since you were a little boy. We were eating breakfast on the porch because of the heat. Graham and I side by side in the swing, Graham sitting upright on the top step. We held our plates in our laps as I described most of what had happened yesterday, leaving out what I learned about Nora and her stepfather. You were right about us needing to be ready, I told Graham. None of us were ready. Not really. So much fresh pain after all these years, Graham sighed. No wonder the girl had to run from it. You know, we always had a feeling that she blamed Abe for the accident, Graham said, although we didn't fully understand why. Abe never spoke to us about that night. We didn't ask him to. We wanted to help him put it behind him. Now the truth comes out. She was wrong to accuse him in front of Nora, Graham said, but if he's been carrying that burden of guilt all these years, then perhaps it's better for both of them that it's all out in the open now. She seemed crazy, I said. She's lost so much in this town, son, Graham insisted, gently. More than enough to make a person crazy. He looked over his shoulder at Graham, and they exchanged a look I didn't recognize. Guilt? Regret? But then Graham spoke, and her voice was fierce. I couldn't let her have Riverside, Peter. It wouldn't have been right. I had to do what I did for Eleonora. It went deeper than that, Ida, Gramps tried. Tell the boy why you felt so strongly about it. Graham stopped the swing and put down her plate. She spoke without looking at either of us. We sold the property to Eleonora, knowing it would fall to Paul after she died. It was time for us to move on. But there was another reason we sold it when we did. Eleonora was angry at me. She thought I had taken her son away from her that fall. It was because of the moths. I thought he needed them, and I encouraged him, guided him, kept him with me in the lab after school. Once I realized how much I'd hurt her, I was desperate to make it right. I needed to offer Riverside to her so that she could leave Paul something even more important than what I'd given him. And it made things right again between us before she died. I was so grateful for that. She rummaged in the pocket of her gardening smock for a Kleenex, found one, and dabbing her eyes. But there was a cruelty in it, she continued, a terrible cruelty, taking a stand like that against a young woman who was already in so much pain. Gramps added softly, It was such a difficult time, Peter, like a tunnel we thought we would never find our way out of, and I suppose some of us never did. Then we were all silent for a moment, lost in our own thoughts. Beside me, Graham wiped her eyes one last time and began to move the swing again, slightly. Do you think Nora is staying close to the river, Peter? She asked. I do, I said. There are signs. Signs, she repeated. Did you know that sleeping near the river after a battle is an ancient rite? I heard this from Graham before, and I nodded and put my hand over the nearest of hers. I used to recommend it all the time to my students, but only a few ever listened. Nora is a true McMichael. Her father and her grandmother would be so proud of her. I didn't get up. I didn't bolt for my room to avoid an emotional moment. I stayed on the swing beside my Gramps and I looked at each other, a long moment, man to man. I didn't want any one of us to move just yet. At 10 a.m., the temperature was up to 90 degrees and the office was sweltering. I heard a car coming, above the drone of the fan, and I braced myself. A few moments later, Linda appeared at the screen door, wearing cutoffs and a t-shirt, her hair straight and loose. It hung clear to the middle of her back. Today she looked like a teenager, except for her face, puffy and wrinkled under a layer of makeup. I was wary. I waited for her to come inside, but for a long moment she just stood, silently staring at the office through the screen. "Door's open," I called. She took a halting step, looking around. "Man, you would not believe how weird it feels to step into this old house again. You remember it?" She nodded. "Oh my God, yes. Although the place was empty when I met Paul. The Sheltons had already moved out, but they were still taking care of it. Paul lived in a house in town with his brother." She came farther into the room, cringing visibly as though she expected something to fall on her head from above. "Yeah, he brought me over here a few times. Wanted me to see where his big old nature center would be one day. I acted interested. I was a good sport about it." She crossed her arms tightly across her chest and made her way slowly to the space behind my desk, to my bulletin board, where she peered at my drawings a little suspiciously, the same way Nora had on the day she'd first come over to the center. I watched her from the corner of my eye, realizing that despite how rough she looked today, she had probably been truly gorgeous when Paul had first met her. She turned and caught me staring. She smiled. "So, have you talked to Nora yet?" she asked brightly. "Haven't seen her," I replied, and it was true. She came around to the front of my little desk and leaned over it slightly. Involuntarily, I found myself leaning backwards away from her. "You know, Pete, I'm very sorry about what happened yesterday," she said. "I didn't come back to Buchanan to make a scene like that. Honestly, I don't know what got into me." She hesitated and added, "Well, actually, I do know, but I didn't mean to go off like that in front of everybody. I hope you can believe me." I changed the subject. "Where did you end up staying last night?" "Turns out an old friend of mine still lives here in town, a distant cousin, Rita. The same cousin I was spending the summer with when I met Nora's father. Anyway, talk about a time warp. Rita is still living in the same house, has 3 kids, and is twice divorced. She said I could stay with her until we work things out, Nora and me." She was staring at my fern drawings, wood ferns, walking ferns, polypody. "You drew these?" she asked, looking over my shoulder. I nodded. "You take after your mom, huh?" I must have looked surprised. "The artist thing," she explained. "Your mom was one too." "How do you know that?" She shrugged. "I don't know. I never met her. Paul must have told me. I guess they were pals for a little while, before she took off. She liked the bugs and the flowers and that whole knowing the names of birds thing. Ornithology. Had anyone ever told me this? In a faraway place in my mind, it seemed like something I used to know. She was a scientist. She was more of an artist than a scientist. She ran off to Idaho and never came back. She never came back here, Linda asked, as if reading my thoughts. After she joined that religious cult or whatever it was. I hesitated for a long moment, and then I asked calmly, "It was a religious cult?" "I'm pretty sure. Somewhere out of state. Iowa, Idaho. Didn't the Sheltons ever tell you?" "It's been a long time since it's come up, actually. I don't generally talk about her." "Yeah, it was one of those cults that were big in the 80s, where you cut off all past ties, crazy stuff. Although, believe me, I knew plenty of people who did crazy stuff back then, like me, for instance. Moving to the middle of nowhere and hooking up with a nature guy, a man I had nothing in common with." "Why did you marry him?" "Silly boy, I was crazy in love." "But you just said you didn't have anything in common with him." "So I pretended." She was pacing now. "Pretended to love the great outdoors. It was an Oscar-winning performance. That's what you do when you fall in love with somebody who's really, really different from you, Pete. You pretend." I didn't like where the conversation was going. "Nora's not pretending," I insisted quietly. "Well, she's one fast learner, you have to admit that much." Linda came back to my desk and leaned over it, her face too friendly. "So where did our favorite girl sleep last night?" "I don't know. I told you, I haven't seen her." "Where do you think she slept?" Somewhere on the other side of the river. The canoe's gone, and there's a tent and a sleeping bag missing from the basement. My daughter's sleeping in a tent? Oh, honey, I don't think so. I shrugged, unwilling to argue. You're a nice kid, Pete, Linda said. You have a sweet, honest face. I noticed it right away, but you don't want to get caught in the middle of this mess. And you need to understand something about my Nora. The girl makes trouble wherever she goes. She thrives on it. She didn't make any trouble here, I said, although after I said it, I realized it wasn't true. Linda straightened up and crossed her arms again, losing patience. Well, she made enough trouble back home to last a lifetime. She had a fling with her stepdad, okay? My husband at the time. Are you listening? And she knew exactly what she was doing, too. She did it deliberately to hurt me. You really think you know this girl? I know that when she came here, she was pretty messed up, I said evenly, but I believe she's changed. Oh, right, she's completely reformed. Give me a break. I hate to be the one to break it to you, but the girl is using you. She's using you, and she's using your uncle, too, although he deserves it. Nora is my daughter, and I love her, but she uses people left and right. I didn't back down. I think spending time with Abe has changed her. Linda threw up her arms. God, you're such a romantic. People around here live in a dream world. Her father was the same way, just so blind about everything, and so obsessed with this place. Over the moon about a stupid, muddy river. But you know what? He loved me, but would have done anything for me. He was going to build me my dream house right on this river, and he sure as hell wouldn't have wanted me to end up with nothing when he died. These small-minded people around here, they just couldn't understand that. I looked down at my hands on the desk. The office hummed with my refusal to respond. Linda picked up a tiny bat skull from my desktop. I thought for a moment she might throw it against the wall, but instead she put it gingerly back down on the desk and gave me her more calculated smile again. Okay, big guy, here's the deal. Here's what you need to tell our girl. Tell her I'll give her another day or two to think about whatever it is she needs to think about. If that's what's required, I can handle it. I'll stay at Rita's. Let me give you the phone number there. She rummaged in her purse for a pen and a scrap of paper, scribbled a phone number, and set the note on one corner of my desk. When will you be talking to her? I don't know, Mrs. Cobb. Call me Linda. When do you think you'll be talking to her? It's up to her at this point. I'll see if she appears. Appears, Linda repeated. Oh, she'll appear all right. She'll be wanting something from you. Don't you worry. And when she does, you give her that number and tell her I'm still here and I'm not leaving without her. Then she was gone. The fan clattered in the silence. I took a few deep breaths, then opened the drawer of my desk and took out the note Nora had left me during the night. I couldn't tell you before. I was too afraid it would make you change your mind about me. Please don't tell Abe, and tell him not to look for me. I'm okay. I just need to hide for a while. Love, Nora. Abe drove up in the Jeep and lumbered into the office, rumpled, unshaven, and walking with a dip in his step because he was carrying a heavy metal case by its handle, a familiar metal case, the Moth collection. He set the case on his own desk and turned to me. I know it sounds crazy, he said, but I can't stand these things. They're moths, Abe. Well, I can't have them in the house if she's leaving. Are you sure she's leaving? Abe gave me the totally defeated look again. Why would she want to stay with me now? Your brother's death was a freak accident, I said patiently. Trust me, it doesn't change how Nora feels about you. It was her dad, Abe argued softly. The father she never got to know, and he died because of me. I didn't know what to say to this. I just shook my head. Have you talked to her? He said. No, but I got a note from her this morning, I told him. She's okay. She's camping on the river, but she's hiding because of something else. Something that happened before she came here. You mean the thing with her stepdad? He asked. My jaw dropped. You knew? I didn't know. I suspected. There was something about the way she wouldn't talk about him, wouldn't even say his name. I had a bad feeling about it. It was one of those reasons I felt so strongly about not sending her back to Indianapolis. I wanted to protect her. His voice broke. A sob caught him off guard. He lowered himself into his chair and covered his face. I wanted to steady him. I walked over to where he was sitting and put a firm hand on his shoulder, as he had done so many times with me. After a moment, he uncovered his face and made an effort to pull himself together. Oh God, he sighed. I don't know what to do with myself. When are Bella and Christina coming in? Bella's in Chicago, remember? I don't know about Christina. I wish she'd come in, he said mournfully. Abe, she's in the phone book. He pretended not to hear this. Instead, he stood up and began searching around the office for his hat. I need to walk. Yeah, maybe I'll just check the trails out this morning. See what I can see. Go ahead, I replied silently. Let Nora see you. She needs to know that you're still king of Riverside, no matter what happened 15 years ago, no matter what you said that night your brother died. I took the Moths downstairs to my studio to see what secrets they still held for me. Luna, Imperial, Polyphemesis, Promethea, Isabella Tiger, one broken case, one tethered moth, the sad Cecropia. I handled the cases carefully. My feelings about them had not changed. I laid them flat on my drawing table to admire them. An hour passed in an instant. As I began to restack them in the crate, I noticed an oddly loose corner inside the top of the metal lid. An old piece of gray cardboard had broken free. When I gave the cardboard the gentlest tug, it came out further, and I saw that it was the backside of a framed certificate, a first-place certificate from the Department of Education of the State of Michigan, signed by the governor. But there was more. Jammed underneath the certificate was an old notebook, a thin spiral that had been clamped in place under the certificate frame. I pulled it out carefully, placed it on my table, and stared at it in amazement. Moth Journal, 1988 to 1989. The cover read, Paul Thomas McMichael. It was quite a read. A few months of careful, passionate notes by someone I shared many things in common with. Love for a place called Riverside, gratitude to a certain science teacher, fascination with moths and their lore, disinterest in superficial friendships, and in those very last entries, deep longing for a girl who would walk beside him and understand him and not see him in light of the tragedy in his life, and not one single sentence, not a blessed word about a mother. Christina answered her doorbell in a flowered tent of a dress, and because I had never seen her in anything but jeans and old overalls, the first thing I said to her was, "Where are you going?" "Dear boy," she said, "it's 8:30 in the morning. This is a house dress. I've never seen you in a dress before. We're in a heat wave. Haven't you noticed? It's way too hot for jeans." She pointed with disapproval at me. "I don't have any house dresses," I said, and she threw her head back and barked with laughter. It was so great to hear somebody flat out laughing that I could have stood on her porch for the rest of the morning just to keep hearing it. But she waved me inside, still giggling, and I followed her into the kitchen. "Do you want coffee?" she asked. I said yes. She led me onto a small deck of the kitchen, where I viewed the far side of her subdivision. Across a fake pond were about 20 other prefab houses, no trees, no shade anywhere except the red and green canvas umbrellas under the patio tables on neighboring decks. Christina adjusted her umbrella to block the already hot sun. No wonder she loves coming to Riverside, I thought. I asked her if she'd heard anything from Bella. "She called me yesterday," Christina said, "and it's even hotter in Chicago than it is here. Her dad thinks it's too hot to do anything, and she's painfully bored." Forgive me, but that is music to my ears. She sat down across from me and rested her chin in her hands. "But that's not why you're here, is it, Pete? To talk about Bella?" "I needed to tell you about a few things that have happened since you stopped coming out." "I know some of them. A certain female visitor. Sounds like you've had quite a blast from the past." "Who told you?" "Nora did. She rode Abe's bike all the way from Riverside last night. It took her over 2 hours. I made her take a shower, eat some real food, sleep in Bella's bed, but before I woke up this morning, she was gone again. You're lucky. No one else has even seen her." "Well, she's just fine, Pete. She really is. Although you should have seen the filthy clothes on her. They're soaking in the laundry tub. I gave her a couple of clean outfits and a different pair of boots." She pointed to a corner of the deck where Nora's stained and muddy work boots sat. I recognized them with a pang. "Did she tell you what her mom said about the night Paul McMichael died?" I heard the whole story. And man, do I wish I'd been there. I would have given that woman a run for her money. She would have had to knock me down first to go after Abe like that, and saying those awful things right in front of Nora. She took a calming breath, settling her anger. For a moment, I pictured it. Christina with her wild hair putting herself between Linda and Abe. It made me smile. Christina noticed. "You think I'm kidding?" "No, I was just thinking that I wish you had been there. Honestly, as if that man hasn't been through enough in his lifetime." "Nora's mom is still here," I told her. "Believe me, I know. The woman calls night and day. Nora left her cell phone here to charge, and there will probably be 15 new messages from just this morning. Mom is on the warpath, but Nora's not ready to deal with Mom. And no wonder. I heard all about the creepy stepdad, too. Sounds like Mom's taste in men took a big nosedive after she left Buchanan. I was relieved that she knew, but there's something I don't understand, Christina, I said. Why would Nora even consider leaving with her mom? She can stay with Abe as long as she wants to. She knows that. It doesn't make sense to me. It's that mother-daughter thing, Pete, she said. It goes way, way deep, and no, it doesn't always make sense to somebody on the outside looking in. She reached across the table and pressed my hand, a brief gesture of sympathy that ordinarily I would have shrank from. So, are you saying you think Nora should leave? Even after how her mom treated her, and treated Abe? Pete, Nora will be back. She's a McMichael now. She's not finished with us. I'd put money on it if I had any. I just don't think she should go, I said. It seems like running away. No, it's way more complicated than running away. She needs to make peace with her mother, if it's at all possible. She needs to try. Pressing my hand again. But you'll miss her terribly, won't you? I wasn't willing to talk about missing Nora. I have something else to ask you, I said. I think Abe would really appreciate seeing you. I think you could help him. What makes you think Abe would appreciate my help, Pete? He hasn't given me any signals that he wants it. He's been missing you, I insisted. There are signs. She sighed. I know the signs, Pete. Believe me, I've been watching them for months. But at my age, I have to be realistic. I'm not a teenager anymore, no offense. You shouldn't give up. Try a new strategy. Nora says it's best to be really direct with Abe. I'm not Nora, she argued softly. I'm not family. I'm just a person who comes out to Riverside to shovel bark and change the coffee filters. Maybe he thinks I'm too old for him. No, Christina, I'm sure he likes you. Christina covered her face with one hand, as though I had told her something upsetting. After a moment, she uncovered it. Let's get back to how you feel about Nora leaving, she said. Are you afraid she'll forget you? Get another boyfriend? Make a bunch of new mistakes when she's out of your sight? Or are you more afraid that if she goes away, you'll forget her? Because that's what you do, isn't it? You move ahead in a straight line and you don't look back. Am I right? Is that something else you learned from Abe? I took note of her dead-on accuracy. Wow, I said. Have you been talking to my gram? I don't really know your gram, Pete. I never did the science thing in high school. I knew some kids who joined her after-school club and became her followers. She was kind of a nature guru for a lot of kids. But that just wasn't me. I never joined any high school clubs. I was too rebellious. My mom was one of Graham's favorites, I said. Christina's eyes widened. Your mom? That's why she came back to Buchanan for help. You mean after she had you? I nodded. She looked up her old favorite teacher and Graham took her in. I've always wondered what the deal was with your mom, but it seemed like you didn't want to talk about it. I didn't, I said. But then I added, impulsively, she knew Paul. They, knew each other. They were seeing each other. You mean, oh, for heaven's sakes, are you sure? I'm totally sure. I never knew that. That's a little unsettling, isn't it? Does Abe know? I don't know, I said. We could go ask him right now. She shook her head. I'm not going to Riverside, Pete. I'm feeling just a little too fragile. Right. Whatever. I finished my coffee, disappointed that I hadn't convinced her about Abe, but at the same time, it felt good to have told her a bit of my own history. Surprisingly, solidly good. Before I left, Christina bagged up some of Bella's cereal and a few other things from her fridge, gave me Nora's charged cell phone, and thanked me for stopping by. At the office was another note. I'm afraid you'll think I'm running away, but I'm not. This is different. I need you to believe me. Do you believe me? What you think about me matters so much. Love, Nora.